The loss to the Blazers is in the past. Now our attention turns to a tough weekend doubleheader. Kings and Clippers at home on Saturday. Kings and Warriors in Golden State on Sunday. And here to preview the Kings and Clippers matchup inside the Golden One Center, Darian Vaziri, host of the Locked On Clippers podcast, joins me right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and, of course, all off season too. And thank you for a very successful off season here. Now we're back to regular season Kings basketball. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10 News. And you'll notice at the very beginning of this conversation, this preview of Kings and Clippers on Saturday, we mentioned the likelihood of Kawhi Leonard and John Wall not being available for the Clippers, or rather resting because of load management for the Clippers, not playing in this back-to-back. The Clippers also have a weekend back-to-back. The Kings on Saturday, the Phoenix Suns on Sunday. That Suns game is their technical home opener, even though they played the Lakers inside the Staples Center. It was a Lakers home game, their first game of the season. Regardless, it sounds like the Kings will only really have, and this is, I don't mean this literally, but will only really have Paul George out of their big three, or definitely big two, to worry about, which Kings fans who know the Kings history of playing to the level of their competition and struggling against teams who are shorthanded, maybe that scares you a little bit. But that has not been confirmed yet that Kawhi and John Wall will not be playing. So we are proceeding and discussing as if that will happen. That is the expectation. Of course, things could change between now, the time of this recording, and the game itself. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But we proceed as if it's just going to be Paul George and company that the Kings will be facing inside the Golden One Center. So please enjoy this crossover edition of Locked On Kings and Locked On Clippers, previewing Kings and Clippers inside the Golden One Center on Saturday night. Hello, I'm Matt George, host of the Locked On Kings podcast. Joining me, Darian Vaziri, host of the Locked On Clippers podcast. Clippers 1-0, Kings 0-1. Both teams gearing up for their meeting in Sacramento on Saturday. The Kings have had a couple of days to correct their mistakes from their loss to the Portland Trail Blazers. Looking forward to this game. And the Clippers are coming off of a good start that, Darian, the Clippers had to wait a while just to play their first game, man. So I credit your and the Los Angeles Clippers fans' patience level, because I was dying on opening night of the NBA for Kings basketball.
First off, I want to say thanks for the collab. I'm excited to be here. Excited to collab with Locked On Kings. And yeah, it was a little wait, especially considering Kawhi Leonard. Oh my God. Considering Kawhi Leonard being out for over a year, it was a longer wait for that. But it all worked out. Clippers are back on the court, 1-0. It wasn't pretty the first game against the Lakers, 22 turnovers. And I don't think it's going to be easy going into a tough place to play. Sacramento is never easy, and it's a pretty exciting young team.
Well, that might be the difference between where the Clippers are at and where the Kings are at, because the Clippers played a not great game, you're saying, and found a way to win. The Sacramento Kings played a somewhat solid, also at times bad game. Head coach Mike Brown wasn't happy with the effort of the Sacramento Kings compared to how they played during training camp and preseason, but still they were very much in that game and found a way to lose. That just speaks to, in my opinion, just where these two teams are at. But heading into this game, the first thing I want to ask you about and get an update from you and the Locked On Clippers perspective is, we hear the possibilities of maybe the Clippers aren't going to be at full strength, which to Kings fans who watch Kings basketball consistently, that might actually scare us more than make us excited. But what is the situation with Kawhi and John Wall and Paul George heading into this matchup on Saturday?
So the Clippers play on Sunday against the Phoenix Suns in the home opener. I think Kawhi Leonard will be playing in front of the fans and against a team that not only beat the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals, but won 64 games last season, and you'd say is the better team. So I would say Kawhi Leonard and John Wall are going to load manage against the Kings. Paul George should be playing, and the Clippers have so much depth. The rest of the guys will be playing, but Kawhi Leonard and John Wall, I think, will be rested against Sacramento.
Yeah, some people might look at that as a bullet dodge for the Kings, but truly, and especially last season when the Kings took on teams that were not at full strength, they allowed other guys to beat them. And you talk about the depth of the Los Angeles Clippers. I think the depth is a strength of the Sacramento Kings this year, and the Kings will finally, we believe, have Keegan Murray. All signs point to Keegan Murray actually being set to make his debut. So Kings fans are excited about that. But talking about the depth for both these teams a little bit, what is it about the Clippers' depth in your mind that even without Kawhi, even without John Wall, Sacramento Kings fans and the Kings themselves should really game plan hard for, in addition, of course, to Paul George?
Well, I'd say Norman Powell and Marcus Morris are capable, as well as Reggie Jackson, are capable of scoring 15 to 20 points on any given night. I'd say the main thing is to be careful of the three-point shot, where the role players run guys off the three-point line and force them to get into the mid-range or attack the basket. And I would really say Paul George has had a real hesitancy in the preseason and in the game against the Lakers to go to the basket. You know, he's settled for a lot of jump shots, and I think if the Kings get him to settle for a lot of jump shots, they take him out of rhythm. And then if Paul George doesn't play well, when Kawhi Leonard and John Wall are not playing, gives the Sacramento Kings a really good chance to get that first win of the season. But a guy that I would really say is someone that you probably don't game plan for, but you really should, Luke Kennard. If you can prevent that guy from getting open threes as much as possible, then you have a good chance to beat the Clippers. The guy missed 2 shots in preseason, and he made all his threes in the Laker game. And I guarantee, I wouldn't say guarantee, but I've been telling listeners he's going to shoot 50% from 3 this season.
Well, Luke Kennard is someone that I know and we've seen in the past in his time in Sacramento, mainly when he was with Detroit, how much of a flamethrower he can be from three-point range. And the Kings have a tendency to sometimes let those guys slip away. Now, we're hoping a lot of the Kings' tendencies of the past are starting to be broken down and gotten rid of by new head coach Mike Brown. But let's talk about really quickly the Kings' perspective on this. From a Clippers standpoint, what is concerning about playing the Kings, or what do you think the Kings, or rather the Clippers, are game planning hard for on the Kings side?
Well, if you remember in the 2019-20 season, the Clippers, I believe, lost 2 games at home to the Kings. And if I'm not mistaken, lost one in 2021 as well. And the reason why I mentioned those 2 years is because Kawhi was healthy. Even though he probably won't play on Saturday, but De'Aaron Fox, his speed coming off screens and just guarding him in the pick and roll can be very tough. He's got the ability to hit the floater, and he's very explosive going to the basket. The Clippers have struggled at times with quicker guards, and De'Aaron Fox is a fairly tall, like long arms, athletic guard, and the Clippers have struggled with him at times. So I'm interested to see how much small ball the Clippers are going to play in terms of switching everything and trying to take away De'Aaron Fox's downhill looks at the rim. But I'm also interested. I think this is the first time the Clippers are playing the Kings with Sabonis. So I'm really excited to see how tough it's going to be. And I think that's one counter to the small ball. If the Clippers do go small, if Sabonis is on the floor, I would look to get him involved in the post, because he's one of those players that can really actually score in the post and is a good touch around the basket and has those true big men tendencies as well. So that may be a concern. I think it was – actually, I went to a game against the Kings last season where the Terrence Davis made every single 3 he took. So I really hope the Clippers don't get burned on the 3 ball by him. But it's mainly De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis. And that would bring me to ask you, how has that duo been so far for the Kings? Even though last season you probably didn't get to see them really get time to really mesh, but now they have a full training camp. How did it look in that first game? Because my League Pass app was killing me. I didn't get to watch any of the game.
Yeah, De'Aaron Fox shined. He had an excellent game, a 33 points, 7 assists, 7 rebound performance. Did turn the ball over 8 times and didn't score in the final rounded up 5 minutes of the game, which ended up hurting the Kings in this one. But he looked every bit of the star that the Sacramento Kings need him to be, especially from 3-point range. I think he went 4 of 5 from 3 or 4 of 6 from 3-point range or something like that, which is really, really good for him. But as a whole, the Sacramento Kings as a team shot over 43s in this game, which is something that Mike Brown and his coaching staff have said he wants the Kings to do, but it wasn't necessarily the type of threes that the Kings want. So we'll get back to this because I want to ask you a question about the 3-point defense of the Clippers. But going back to Fox and Sabonis actually had I don't want to say unimpactful, but not as good of a night as the Kings would expect out of their best/second best player and their big man. Now, I give the Portland Trailblazers credit. I thought they actually did a pretty good job defending Domantas Sabonis. So I don't know if we should look at this as okay, Sabonis didn't play great in game 1. He's coming out with a chip on his shoulder in game 2. Beware Clippers. Or maybe Fox and Sabonis and this new Kings team are still trying to figure everything out. There have been times where Sabonis has honestly been too passive because he's such a good passing big that you want him to score a little bit more. So I do believe that the Kings would stick to a Sabonis lineup if the Clippers went small and try and punish that lineup on the offensive end. They wouldn't be afraid to keep him out there, even if there's questions about how that would affect the defense. But there's belief that pairing is going to do really well. And what's great about Domantas Sabonis too is he pairs so well with everybody else on the floor because everybody can roll off him, cut off him. He can set screens for everybody. So I'm not too worried about that pairing going forward. I definitely think the Clippers should be, but they should also be paying close attention to the 3-point shot, how many 3-point shooters are on this Kings roster, and the difference between a high quality and a average quality 3-point shot that the Kings are looking for, because they're especially in preseason, they've been able to create a lot of high quality 3-point shots.
Yeah, I guess preventing the open threes is all about containing the dribble penetration. Obviously, guys are going to be open when guys are over helping and are forced to help. So that's a big reason why Ty Lue likes to go with that switch everything scheme to make teams play in isolation and prevent more of those. De'Aaron comes off the screen, gets downhill, big man needs to step up, and someone needs to help the helper, and then De'Aaron will find an open shooter. So it's all about staying in front, and I'm really interested just to see the lineups. Ty Lue said that Ivica Zubac would come out at like the 5-minute, 6-minute mark of first quarters, and then they play a small ball lineup with Robert Covington and Nico Batum. But in the Laker game, because of Anthony Davis, I think the Clippers didn't go to that. They kept Zubac in all the way up until like the 3-minute mark. And Ivica Zubac actually ended up playing 35 minutes, which is a lot for him. Not saying I don't like him playing that amount of minutes, but he's been a guy who everyone says Zoo should play more minutes. Zoo should play more minutes. But there are times where the Clippers have looked so good with the small ball lineups being able to switch everything and obviously space the floor so much on the offensive side of things that Zubac can sit on the bench for extended minutes. But he really is a very good center. I mean, if he averaged 29, 30 minutes a game, he would average a double-double, no doubt in my mind. He's been really close to that number the last couple of years anyway. So I'm interested to see if the Clippers use that same Anthony Davis approach with Zubac and keep Zubac in whenever Sabonis is in. That could very well be a thing.
Well, you mentioned defending and staying in front of your man, and a lot of what Mike Brown was frustrated about, even though the Kings still shot around 40% from 3-point range. I can't exactly remember, but they took 40+ attempts. Mike wasn't super pleased with the looks that the Kings were getting on the perimeter because a lot of them weren't coming off of paint touches, attacking the paint, things of that nature. So is, in your mind, the Clippers game plan for this, is it still to kind of contain the paint, and if the Kings beat you from 3 and hit a lot of 3-point shots, they beat you? Or do you think the Kings or rather the Clippers are going to be more willing to spread things out, take away that 3-point shot for guys like a Kevin Huerter, maybe a Harrison Barnes, a Keegan Murray if he plays, and then rely on their switching and their help defense for guys like Fox and Sabonis and anyone who wants to cut and try and attack the basket?
That's a hard question to answer because it's still so early in the season and you don't have a previous matchup to really go off of. I mean, going back to last season, it's a different team. Keegan Murray, Kevin Huerter, these guys and Sabonis have all come into this Kings team. So I'd say based on previous matchups, even though the Clippers did get killed by Terrence Davis, especially in one game last season, I'd say it's to limit De'Aaron Fox. I mean, you said 33 points in the first game. It's a pretty good start to the season. I think it's going to be to limit easy baskets. And I'd say if I had to choose, it would be to force the Kings to get hot from the outside. But it's really going to be all about, as you said, what kind of looks the Kings get. If the Clippers can make the Kings take some semi-contested threes and work hard for every shot, then it'll be okay. But if they're getting open shots and De'Aaron Fox is carving the Clippers defense apart, then I think things could get ugly for the Clippers, especially, the Kings have some younger players, and the Clippers have struggled at times. It's kind of an older roster. The Clippers struggled at times with more athletic teams that can play a little bit faster. In particular, Memphis gave us a lot of problems last season. So I'm interested to see how it works out. It's just gonna be exciting to see the Kings for the first time this season in new Kings team.
When you talked about the next night, the Clippers have the Phoenix Suns. The next night, the Kings have the Golden State Warriors. So the Kings aren't necessarily looking at either of these two teams as gettable. They're just hoping to get one, maybe two. Versus the Clippers might look at the Kings as significantly more gettable than the Phoenix Suns. Is that how you think not that the Clippers are disrespecting the Kings by any means, because I know Ty Lue and that roster is smart enough not to do anything like that, but do you think the Clippers feel confident in their ability to defeat the Sacramento Kings without Wall and Kawhi potentially, so much so that they're willing to make this move and this decision? Is it really more in your mind about the home opener versus the Suns than it is about, okay, we don't need to be at full strength to defeat Sacramento?
I think it is, as well as Kawhi Leonard and John Wall, especially Kawhi, are going to sit out back-to-backs. Kawhi Leonard is going to sit out back-to-backs, and it's not even just about the Suns. I think it's also just about the home opener for the fans. I think there is a level of, for the organization to play Kawhi Leonard in front of the fans. I'll probably be in attendance on Sunday. I don't really think it's disrespecting the Kings as much as it is what I said just now, but also the Clippers have shown the ability under Ty Lue to win games without Kawhi Leonard, but also without both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Last season, Paul George missed 51 games, and the Clippers still won. And obviously, Kawhi missed 82 games, and the Clippers won 42 games. So it's just because he gets the guys motivated. The Clippers are very deep, and more often than not, the Laker game wouldn't be a good example, but the Clippers ball movement is usually very good, and they run some creative sets. Not Warriors creative, but they run some creative sets that are, since Ty Lue has become the head coach of the Clippers, much more creative offense than what we saw with Glenn Rivers. So it's going to be a fun game. As a Clipper fan, I expect the Clippers to win, because I don't think that it's not even anything against the Kings. Most teams that the Clippers play, even without Kawhi Leonard, I think they should be good enough to beat.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the #1 source for all of your football and now basketball betting. College, professional, does not matter. They have it all. NFL fans, make sure you take advantage of all the amazing lines that they have out there, all the pre-game access, week build-up information that BetOnline provides you before a big game on Thursday, Sunday, or Monday. And then, of course, NBA fans, BetOnline.net has the absolute best lines, props, and future bets surrounding your favorite team. If that's the Sacramento Kings, you can make some money off of either your optimism or pessimism surrounding the team. Use your Kings knowledge to help fill your wallet a little bit this season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And right now, the Kings and Clippers game does not yet have a line on BetOnline, at least at the time of this recording, because we still don't know who's going to be playing and who's going to be out for the Clippers. So BetOnline is waiting for a little more information before they set that line. Regardless of who's favorite and who's the underdog, I think it's going to be a close point spread, as I'm expecting a close game between these two teams. Hopefully you can make some money off that game. And it's not just basketball and football. Of course, they have the MLB playoffs going on right now, MMA, boxing, golf. They have it all. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. What do the Sacramento Kings have to do to defeat the Los Angeles Clippers?
For me, make the open threes and limit Paul George. I think Paul George, if he doesn't play well when Kawhi's not there and John Wall's not there, yes, the Clippers have other guys that can, make up for it. But when your best player doesn't play well and you only really have one star out there, it really can help your chances. And Paul George has this tendency, when he has bad games, he can have really bad games. So if the Kings can hold him to an inefficient shooting night, I think the Kings' chances are really strong. And continuing to move the ball and making the Clippers' defense work, generating open threes. And if they get hot from three, and the Clippers could be in trouble, especially with that home crowd. Sacramento has a really good fan base, and it's never easy to play there. So that's what I would say. Hit the open threes, and if you can force Paul George to have a tough game, that would be huge.
Now, when you say an inefficient night for Paul George, is there like a number? If Paul George gets this number or better, the Clippers have a really good chance of winning.
You're talking points or like efficiency?
Either or, but really points is what I'm looking at. Like he has to have a 30-point game for the Clippers to win, or if you hold him to 25, the Kings are probably in good shape.
I think if you hold him to under 25 points, and I'd say under 42%, chances are really strong. One thing I noticed too is when the Clippers went to their small ball unit against the Lakers started giving them a taste of their own medicine and switching the screens that were set. Everybody besides Anthony Davis, basically, that was getting put in pick and roll, whether it was this. I noticed the Clippers ran a lot of small pick and rolls. Like, for example, Kennard would be setting the screen on Paul George and try to go for that quick slip. One thing the Lakers are doing to kind of snuff that out was switching those at the top of the key. And the big reason why that works is because there are certain guys like Robert Covington, Nicholas Batum, Luke Kennard. They're not the type of guys that are going to take advantage of mismatches if they have a 2 or 3 2 or 3 inch size advantage. Like you could get away with switching De'Aaron Fox onto a Robert Covington for a possession, or even a Kevin Huerter onto a Nicholas Batum. I'd say the main thing is you got to rebound, but those aren't the type of guys that are going to take advantage of that. So if the Kings can switch some of those ball screens, especially with the guards and forwards setting them on Paul George and Reggie and those guys, they will take away a lot of open threes for the Clippers and force the Clippers into isolation. And one of the things I've noticed about the Clippers over the last couple of years, when teams switch everything on them, they tend to take a lot of bad shots and contested threes. So if the Kings can force the Clippers to take those contested threes and not move the ball and get open looks, chances are very high for them to win. I'm more worried about this game than I was going into the season because I saw the way the Clippers played against the Lakers, and it wasn't very pretty.
There is a good chance, though, that Paul George can take the tough night that he had, kind of remove some of the rust, recognize that a lot is on his shoulders with how shorthanded the Clippers are, and that's where, diamonds really shine brightest. Maybe you get the Indiana Pacers version of young Paul George, who makes an appearance back in Sacramento, which I'm sure Kings fans are fearful of. But in order to defeat the Sacramento Kings, it's funny. It's almost the opposite in some ways. Like on one hand, I would say if the Clippers get other people involved, then they're probably in a really good spot because the Kings are going to give opportunities to guys like Luke Kennard, to Morris, to guys like Nicholas Batum, who will get opportunity to score, to shine. Reggie Jackson's another one too. If guys are ready to step up, next man up mentality, the Sacramento Kings are a team that will allow you to, or have historically allowed you to kind of get yours and showcase yourself a little bit. It seems like a lot of players just come into games against the Kings with a confidence that they're going to get theirs. And Mike Brown is trying to obviously change that. But on the other side of things, like I would say in the past, if you limit De'Aaron Fox, the Kings' chances of winning are next to nothing. Now they have such significant depth that the Kings can get away with a Fox game that's not great. And what we saw during the preseason, what we saw on opening night is Kevin Huerter can get going. He had 23 points. I expect Domantas Sabonis to be better. Keegan Murray likely going to play. Keegan is potentially a 16-plus points per game guy. Harrison Barnes didn't have the best of games in game one, but he's shown the ability to get hot at times. He's very streaky. You mentioned Terrence Davis, who torched the Clippers last time they played. So the Kings have a lot of weapons that can get going. Now, they don't want to have to rely on all those weapons getting going to win. But my point is, if the Los Angeles Clippers can manage to limit the others, limit a breakout performance from someone not named De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis, and really force that star duo just to beat them, that's something we haven't seen them do yet. So that might be an efficient strategy to defeat Sacramento.
Yeah, absolutely. I also was kind of wondering, how do you feel about Mike Brown so far as the coach?
Oh, I love him. I think Mike Brown is fantastic. I think he has a very tough job of changing a culture in Sacramento that is so deeply rooted in losing that it carries a plethora of bad habits that, regardless of how many new players and new coaching staff you have here, those bad habits just continue to stick around. There's been so many players that have come and gone and so many coaches that have come and gone over the last 16 seasons that you would think we're all the same people because they make the same mistakes. And what's funny is after the Kings lost to the Blazers, one of the first things that Brown said was, I didn't recognize that team tonight compared to what we were doing in training camp and in preseason. We weren't making these mistakes in training camp and preseason. And it speaks volumes to us in Sacramento because we know when the lights are brightest, when the games matter, just these old bad habits creep back in. And those are bad habits that I know the Clippers are aware of, the Clippers can exploit, and Mike Brown is going to have to really work to try and break. So I'm hoping having practice days on Thursday and Friday after the loss on Wednesday can help this team refocus on Saturday. And maybe there's that element of, okay, opening night wasn't who we are. Sorry, Clippers. This is who we are. We're going to make an example of you, not because we're better than you, but just because we figured things out. So there is maybe the element of that narrative playing out. Maybe Kings fans have their fingers crossed that the Kings can play out that narrative. But historically, the Kings find ways to lose games that they're very much in. And if this game goes down to the wire, the Clippers can almost count on one or two costly mistakes that if the Clippers exploit them correctly, they'll win the game.
Yeah, I was about to ask or say, I have a feeling this one's going to go down to the wire. And I would ask, what's the confidence in you for the Kings to win a close game? And if you're not confident, why is it the Kings struggle so much to close out games?
Well, I actually was pretty confident in the Kings' ability to close out and defeat the Portland Trailblazers on Wednesday night. They just made some costly errors, and like I mentioned earlier, like De'Aaron didn't score in the last 5 minutes. Domantas Sabonis only had 2 points in the fourth quarter. Like the Kings, in a lot of ways, especially with their own turnovers, they turned the ball over 16 times. Like they just had a lot of unforced errors and bad mistakes that were costly. There were also some questionable foul calls at times and costly foul calls that switched the momentum. So closing or getting over that proverbial hump and just closing out a game is always something that the Kings have struggled with. So I do have confidence in this team's ability to close out a game. I think the idea, the belief is that the Kings can compete on any given night. So the Kings will have more than their fair share of opportunities in close games. So I wouldn't be nervous or scared per se of the Kings in that moment. I would expect the Clippers to be more comfortable and better equipped in those moments than the Kings are. Doesn't mean the Kings can find a way to close it out. But especially when it comes to just decision-making and unforced errors or self-inflicted errors, the Kings hurt themselves a lot of times at the end of the game more than an opposing team hurts them.
You think that comes down to youth or just players prone to make mistakes?
I wouldn't call it youth. I'd call it inexperience because the Kings aren't a young team. They just are an inexperienced team when it comes to winning basketball. And they do have a lot more experienced players that are on the roster now who have won elsewhere. But as a unit, as a group, they're still figuring that out. And when you're led by a player in De'Aaron Fox, who's very, very good, but has never even come close to sniffing postseason basketball before, he has to learn that lesson still as well to some capacity. And he, as the Kings star, needs to learn how to close out games like NBA stars are able to. So it's more inexperience in that moment that honestly the Kings just need to learn by doing.
Yeah. I mean, it really comes down to, in those close games, your stars to take you home. And I think the biggest key more than anything for the Clippers in this game is Paul George to be the best player on the court. If Paul George is the best player on the court, Clippers have a great chance to win. But it's oftentimes when, he should be the best player on the court with Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox, who are great players. But this is Paul George we're talking about. He should outplay them and have a great game, especially coming off that bad game against the Lakers. But you just never know.
Let's wrap up with this. Looking at where the Clippers and Kings could, should, will finish in the standings in the Western Conference. We'll start with the Clippers because everybody expects them to be significantly higher than the Kings, let's be honest. And a lot of it has to do with, you look at the Clippers roster, you look at the big three and go, and well, especially Kawhi and Paul George being healthy together and go, okay, those are major names. That's a star, powerful team.
Wow, who's the third? We have a big three now? Is John Wall the third?
Maybe John Wall's the third. I don't know.
Maybe.
Or maybe, Nick Batum would like to insert himself in there. And I know how
John John Wall has a better chance than Nico. I love Nico, but he's a role player, bona fide.
I know he's a fan favorite over there in Los Angeles, and he's been a Kings killer over the course of his career. But
Really?
he's had moments, especially when he was with Portland, man. When he was playing with LaMarcus Aldridge and young Dame would take so much attention. Nicholas Batum would hit big shot after big shot against the Kings at times back in the day. But maybe it's not a big three. Maybe it's either just those big two, that all-star power that they have at the wing. Where do you think the Los Angeles Clippers belong in the standings conversation? Because for me personally, Clippers aren't at the top for me. Clippers aren't really close to the bottom for me. They're right smack dab in the middle, assuming that they're going to have the season like we expect, which is resting guys at times, but for the most part, guys are staying healthy. I expect them right in like that 3 to 6 range.
Wow. I would say that's lower than most Clipper fans expect them. I mean, I think I don't usually say these kind of things, but I think the Clippers should look to get the number 1 seed. Like, I'm serious. I think Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are going to miss around 20 games if I had to guess. Paul George shouldn't miss 20 games. I just feel like he'll have a small injury somewhere. But if the Clippers have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George play 60-plus games, they should be able to finish around 55 to 60 wins to me, because they've shown the ability to win games without them. And that's why I'm just taking it one game at a time and tackling each game with what's in front of us. And for example, this Kings game, no Kawhi, no John Wall. Probably the announcement will come out tomorrow, Saturday morning. And they should still get the job done for me. Will they? I'm not sure. But considering 42 games, with Paul George out for 51 of them, and then Kawhi Leonard out for 82 of them, and then you add in Norman Powell, who only played 3 games in the regular season for the Clippers last year, and John Wall. I mean, the depth is so high. The team has been together for 3 years now in the Ty Lue era. This is Ty Lue's 3rd season as coach. A lot of these guys, it's their 3rd year playing together. To me, they should finish right around the top, because the Warriors are going to have load management for their stars, and they have a lot of depth too. And then, the Denver Nuggets have to work Jamal Murray back into their system. There's a lot of questions about the Suns. Jaren Jackson Jr. is out for Memphis. I just don't see, there's no reason why the Clippers shouldn't try to be better than these teams. But I can also see the injury concerns having people put them around that 3 to 6 range. It's just that I believe that the Clippers need to get a top 3 seed to win the championship, because only 2 teams in the history of the NBA since the shot clock era have won a championship being lower than a 3 seed, and that's the 69 Celtics and the 95 Rockets. So history says you got to be a top 3 seed.
Well, where do you think the Sacramento Kings are? I'm guessing you don't have them as a top 3 seed then.
No, but I think the Sacramento Kings are obviously going to be fighting for those play-in spots. I think the West got better. For example, the Timberwolves went out and got Gobert. The Pelicans, geez,
really good.
They are going to be scary, and they're a bad matchup for the Clippers too. And then the Blazers got Damian Lillard back. So that's obviously a big thing for them. Now, I want the Sacramento Kings to make the play-in over the Blazers, because it's been since the first year I was really old enough to start watching basketball and remembering it, that 2006 season where Kevin Martin made that game winner against the Spurs.
Yep.
I'll never forget that. But it'll be nice to see Sacramento get a postseason game. So I had them 11th, but the only reason I had them 11th is because of what we said at the top of the show. They're the Kings. It's the same way people used to always say and still think the Clippers will never win a championship. It's the Clippers. There's this aura around them of losing that kind of surrounds these 2 franchises. Obviously, more so the Kings right now than the Clippers. But that's why I have them finishing 11th. But you know what? This is Locked On Kings and Locked On Clippers crossover. I'm going with the 10 seed. Kings get that final spot.
I appreciate that. Well, the fact that you say it's the Kings is actually perfect in reality, because that's essentially what it is. The Kings are fighting themselves just as much as they're fighting everybody else in the West. If the Kings can exercise their own demons, I'm confident in their ability to compete with almost every team on any given night. Now, I'm not expecting the Kings to be right in the mix of the playoff picture. I'd said before, best case scenario for this team is probably 7 or 8 seed, which they would happily take, because I would love to have a home play-in game of some sort in Sacramento for the fans to enjoy, if nothing else, even if that's not real playoff basketball. But look, the Kings have high expectations. They have a roster to actually back it up if everybody plays to the level that we're capable of playing, if Mike Brown can coach to the level that we believe he's capable of coaching, if the defense can have a little bit of a pulse consistently this season. So I do think, let's put it this way. If the Kings aren't a play-in team, something is really wrong. So I don't know who survives. Let's put it that way. I think if the Kings aren't a play-in team, barring kind of catastrophic injury or anything like that, there is an air of, dear God, where do we go from here? So I don't think that's even a possibility or an acceptable outcome for Sacramento at this point. They will be playing some sort of postseason basketball, even if postseason and playoffs are very different. They will be playing some sort of postseason basketball this year, or things are going to be in a panic. Well, finally, with this game on Friday or on Saturday, how you feeling about the Clippers' chances against the Kings? You calling your shot? You calling a Clippers win over Sacramento, even with the Clippers being shorthanded, or do you think the Sacramento Kings have a chance to maybe steal one here?
I think Sacramento absolutely has a chance to steal one, but I have to go with my guys. To go 2-0. I think the performance will be better. I think Paul George will be better. I think somebody I didn't talk about enough in this episode, Marcus Morris Sr. He's looked really good in preseason, looked really solid against the Lakers. I see him having a 20 to 22 point 20 to 23 points against the Kings. Honestly, I think he's going to have a really good game. And yeah, I see the Clippers winning, but in a very close game. I think it's going to come down to those inexperienced mistakes that hopefully the Kings will make for the Clippers' sake.
I think the expectation should be that the Clippers will win. I'm putting all my eggs in two baskets. One, Mike Brown and his ability to correct the mistakes and refocus the team after Wednesday's loss. And number two, Keegan Murray's playing his first game. And I think if you haven't watched Keegan Murray play, Keegan Murray is a really, really good player already, and someone who I think is going to be a more effective player for the Sacramento Kings right out of the gate than maybe they were even expecting. So I'm putting my eggs in those baskets for a Sacramento Kings win, but I'll be honest with you, I would kind of rather play the Clippers at full strength than play just based off of the Kings' history. That's what I'm saying. Exercising their own demons versus the team that they're playing. But I agree with you in the sense that, like, I think it is going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a fun game. It's going to be a fun atmosphere. And here's what I hope. I hope the Kings don't coach this game and approach this game with the thought of the next night's game against Golden State in mind. Like, I don't want them to limit the playing time of other players because of the Golden State game coming up. The Clippers game is probably the more gettable out of the two, and it's at home. Go and get it, and then worry about handling your business the next night.
Yeah, totally agree.
Well, that's where we're at. Crossover edition, Locked On Kings, Locked On Clippers. We'll see who wins. Enjoy the trash talk between the two fan bases. The LA-Sacramento rivalry doesn't stretch as deep with Kings and Clippers as it does with Kings and Lakers. And I'm telling you, a lot of Kings fans really enjoyed the Clippers beating up on the Lakers the other night. Well, keep up the excellent work that you do over there at Locked On Clippers. Locked On Kings will keep on rolling. We'll see who's right when the final buzzer sounds. Was a pleasure speaking with Darian for the first time here on the Locked On Kings podcast and on the Locked On Podcast Network. Darian, the new host of the Locked On Clippers podcast this year. And we'll see if our predictions of this being a close game, an entertaining game that goes down to the wire, if those prove correct. I don't know how much I agree with Darian's assessment that the Clippers should be the number one team in the West, but I mean, they have high expectations over there in La La Land, and it doesn't surprise me that that's what fans are hoping for, asking for, and expecting. But will the Kings actually truly face a Clipper squad that will beat shorthanded? If they do, should the Kings be concerned about that, or should we leave those fears in the past? Talk about that. If you want to respond to anything that Darian and I discussed here, please do so. You can reach me on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack, email me mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. If you're going to the game on Saturday, would love to see you. Let me know. Reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you before the game or during halftime or something like that. And hopefully we will be exiting the Golden One Center feeling a little bit better. Maybe the 1-1 start will just be backwards from what we expected. That's what we're rooting for. I think it's a very winnable game for the Kings, even if the Kings might not be the favorite or the better team, certainly heading into the Golden One Center. But you got to find a way to win games like this, especially on your home floor. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.